Hello, everyone, and welcome to Renewable Energy Communities panel. I'm Roxana Nicula. I'm the chair of the Foundation for the Advancement of Liberty from Madrid, Spain, and I welcome our panelists to tell us more about this exciting work they have been performing for the past year that we hope will go directly to the European Parliament, to ALDE group, to Renew parliamentary group, and also to the other parliamentarians in the European Union, in our own countries, to kind of implement the best practices all our countries have to offer. So without further ado, and before I give the floor to all the panelists to make their introduction, I would like one of you to explain, especially to the online audience, what does it mean, renewable energy communities? So.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So it's not an easy answer, since all around Europe, what is a renewable energy community at different meanings than in practice, and we saw actually by looking at different experiences under investigation. So, but if we would like to be formal and be as much as possible objective, and we, got stuck into the definition provided by the European Directive on renewables, we actually bear in mind that energy communities are a combination of actually renewable generating assets, which should be put in proximity of actually local communities, which can be made actually by natural person or legal entities in the form of small, medium enterprises. We should form, and this is the very important thing to stress, we should form actually a legal entity itself, in the sense that, energy community corresponds to a legal entity, which can have the form of cooperative, limited companies, and so on. The members are kind of shareholders, and these shareholders, these members of the community of this new legal entity, which is a legal entity separated from the legal entity and the natural person being the members of that community. So the members of this new legal entity should actually perform a direct control on these generating assets. But, and this is another aspect to stress, since the management of generating assets, it's not an easy task that me and you or a small medium enterprise can do. The management of these actually asset can be performed by a third entity, usually is an utility, but still the members should exercise a control. So what should be the end of this energy community? So this energy community could actually produce electricity first for self-consumption, and then can store or sell on the market the residual actually production. Of course, the participation is voluntary, but the ultimate goal is not to make profits, but of course you make profits if you sell part of this electricity, but this profit should be actually reinvested to bring social and other kind of benefits, environmental benefits to the community. This actual implementation, this definition has received, as I said, different implementation across Europe, and also different interpretation with respect to the ultimate goal of this actually legal entity. And this is what actually was very interesting to discover, going across different member states and look at what they actually are.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Simone. I think now the audience has learned a little bit about what this REC means. So it's not recording. It's something much more cool and very important for our society. I will start with our panelists, and I will give the floor, first of all, to Slavtcho. Did I pronounce it correctly, Slavtcho? Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the chapter that you've written?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chair. I will allow myself just to borrow something from the previous moderator, who focused on the fact that we in the European Union share common goals, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of specificities country by country. This was also pointed out by the previous speakers, and Bulgaria does not make an exception in this context. Now, from point of view of the paper which I wrote, I want to make 3 points. And my first point is that I'm proud to say that it's already a little bit old, because and I'm proud to say this, let me tell you why, because I wrote the paper in the middle of the summer, and by then we didn't have legislation, adequate legislation, which was adopted literally 3 weeks ago by the Bulgarian parliament. There were very substantial amendments in the law on energy from renewables and also in the energy law. So now the legislation is in line with the EU law. It's another story about the implementation, but legally wise, it is there, and it's a very substantial change. Now, the second point which I want to make is that people in the country are looking very much towards this, and I will give you a couple of reasons for that. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, the European Commission published a report on energy poverty with 25 measures, recommendations how to overcome it. And unfortunately, my country is on the top list of the energy poverty issue with 22.5%. The lowest, by the way, is in Finland, 1.4%. And according to a study by the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, the people who are threatened by energy poverty are up to 40%. And one of the measures which has been recommended by the European Commission in this context, and which is also known by people, are exactly formats like the energy communities, because this will give them the chance to produce their own electricity, and also to a certain extent to make some money out of it in a longer term. So this is very well perceived, but of course the devil is into the details. Ricardo mentioned about the role of the government. I would also add about the role of the regulatory authorities to a very big extent. So we're looking forward how the things will happen. But the good point is that it is there. And the third point which I want to make before ending it is something which was also mentioned about this exchange of best practices, which I think is key, and I would strongly encourage the Foundation to consider next steps in this relation. We shall be happy to host even an event in Bulgaria and to co-organize it, because, as I said, there is a huge difference between law in place and implementation of the law, with pluses and minuses. And on this ground, I want to end once again by thanking the Foundation for giving us the opportunity to start this exchange of experience. But there's a lot of work to be done, both at governmental level and also by NGOs who should, and by the civil society, to push forward for these reforms, because they are needed and they are inevitable. The good point is also that the EU has substantial funds for supporting such kind of steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we continue with Gero Scheck from the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Germany. How are things in Germany, Gero?
So sitting here for the second time, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but actually the legislative framework in Germany regarding renewable energy communities is rather slim. The legislative framework defines what a renewable energy community is, basically to make sure that companies can't have too much influence on those communities. And second base, those communities get some benefits for public tenders. But actually, the history of renewable energy communities is far longer than that. And if you look at the publication, there's one really, really long bar, and that's showing the numbers of renewable energy communities in Germany, which is over 5,000. So, and actually, community-based funding has a long history in Germany. It's called a Genossenschaft, which is hard to translate in Germany, but basically means like a community working together on a project. And because this spirit was already there in Germany, when the Renewable Energies Act came, and it proposed that when renewable energy is produced, it will be bought by the markets. Then there already were groups that were really focused on renewable energy coming from green initiatives, and they saw an opportunity to be able to actually go into this field and produce energy, and that's what they did. And so, as soon as the Renewable Energy Act started, they also started to form renewable energy communities. And those communities, because they were assured that their energy will be bought, they were able to build those plants because basically they had money in the bank and therefore could be financed. In the second step, then also the law, the Genossenschaftslaw, so that regulates communities in general, made it easier for communities to form. They could be smaller, and they needed less bureaucracy. And when that came, there was a really huge spike in community building. So there were hundreds of communities building each year. Basically, so it's not so much the legislative framework in Germany that helped, being the country in Europe that has the most renewable energy communities, but much more is a spirit that was there long before any legislative framework.
Ricardo, can you tell us how is the situation in Portugal?
Sure. It's quite interesting to have these two topics that have such interesting parallels, which is in my home country, and this can serve as a guideline for other countries, our friends in Bulgaria, our friends in Hungary, which is the Portuguese government goes to the civil society and say, hey, we have a lot of money for renewable energy communities. The European Union is giving us all this money with Next Generation EU fund. We put it on the program for recovery and resilience. So there's a lot of money. And we also have energy poverty. Less, we have 20%, 19%. So the citizen goes to the government and says, hey, awesome, I want to do a renewable community on my school, on my kindergarten, in my condominium, in my farm. And the Portuguese government goes like, oh, sorry, because you have to wait. We have to give the permit for you to build it. Then we have to give the permit for you to put it in action. And then we have to give the permit to share it. And then we have to find a place for you to share it. And then we have to control if the equipments are running well. And the citizen goes like, well, screw this. So it's actually quite interesting because in the power purchase agreements, the thing is going 100 miles per hour. And then with the renewable energy communities, it's grinding a lot because there's too many governmental needs. And again, it goes to the point that I was just saying a minute ago and connects with our friends from Bulgaria and our friends from other places in Europe, which is they have to be there. We cannot have people building renewable energy communities and then going to the state and say, yes, I want to contribute to the electric grid. And then the Portuguese government doesn't have an electric grid. And it's like, oh, sorry, we can connect you to the energy grid. We don't have an entry point. So it's a race now. And in my home country, it is true that it is diagnosed, which is good. And then we need a lot of investment, not only on making it possible, but also to improve the response capability. So there's this interesting paradox. And it's going to be my final point. So the government looks at the markets and the civil society you were just mentioning, that anyone could be part of the market. Just looks at the markets and say, please come to us. And then the market goes to the government and the government was like, whoa. We need a lot of people to take care of this. And then the market goes like, well, take care of it. What do you want us to do? And then the Portuguese government was like, okay, we need time, we need people, we need to organize all this. So this kind of tug of war right now, it just drives everyone nuts, but hopefully we're going in a good direction because it is growing. Actually, the regulatory entity in Portugal, and it is in the chapter, it saw a spike of requests of 100%. So there's a lot of demand, and now in pure market fashion, now we have a lot of demand. We have to take care of having a lot of goods to give for that demand, and that is to have a lot of renewable energy communities in Portugal, because we do have the sun, we do have the wind, we do have the hydro. So I'm hoping forward in a couple of years that I have more good news to bring you from Portugal.
Thank you, Ricardo. So thankfully, the Portuguese government and all the other governments in our countries now have this. And they should better apply the solutions that you guys prepared for them. Simona, can you share a little bit of the Italian experience and how is the situation here on the ground?
Yes, well, making a parallel, as Ricardo made, I mean, with respect to PPAs, so I would say that in Italy, the situation is the other way around. While, I mean, we are a little bit struggling with PPAs, with the diffusion of PPAs in a pure market, I mean, with a pure market approach, a different picture actually emerges with renewable energy communities. So if we put aside Germany and Denmark, that for historical reason had a lot of energy communities, so we could say that Italy actually reached a quite actually satisfactory diffusion in very few years, since, I mean, we were pioneering in the sense that before the implementation, the formal implementation of the directive of renewable energy sources, we adopted a transitory regime to foster actually the diffusion of energy communities, especially, I mean, of renewable energy communities, which of course, I mean, since it was transitory, it did not acknowledge all the features of the energy communities that were in the directive, but still, I mean, it was a very important step ahead. And this government in particular put a lot of attention, and maybe tomorrow the Ministry of Energy and Environment, which actually will open, I mean, our conference at the Senate, I mean, we'll probably, I mean, provide more insights. I mean, we put a lot of effort, I mean, in promoting by means of incentives, actually, energy communities. Actually, we had implemented a very generous, I would say, incentive mechanism, I mean, to foster the diffusion of energy communities. And this was because mainly there was awareness that, I mean, energy communities could be not only, I mean, a tool to improve social acceptance, but also a tool through which actually promote innovation in business model of utilities. Because up to today, most, I would say, if not the total, I mean, the vast majority of renewable energy communities which have been implemented in Italy were implemented thanks, I mean, to the support of utilities, which actually enter into a contract with the local communities and took actually the function not only of developing the asset, which is quite costly, but to manage the assets, since, I mean, it's too much complex, but also, I mean, to take, I mean, on their shoulder the administrative costs of renewable energy communities. Because what, I mean, it's always missed is that actually energy communities, since they are a legal entity per se, they have actually quite complex setup in terms of administrative requirements. On one side, and on the other side, I mean, there is actually the very complex aspect to define the rights and obligations within the community. So how are we going to share, how are we going to contribute so to the production of electricity and so on. So actually utilities act as an enabling factor, but of course they will have an earnings back. So this is why, in a nutshell, why we promoted so very strongly, I mean, energy communities. And I would say that in this respect, Italy can represent kind of best practice. Now, I mean, of course, that everything stay together. So, I mean, there are not, I mean, there's not a topic which is not related to another. So, still, I mean, there is an elephant in the room, which is the permitting process and the connection to the grid process. So, if you don't speed up, as the European Commission recommended, I mean, since many years to now, I mean, if you don't provide public entities in charge of providing permitting regimes, so the authorization and the authorization to the grid, I mean, if you don't provide, I mean, ministries, regulatory authority, and TSOs, DSOs with the right competencies inside and the right incentives, I mean, you will still struggle in promoting both renewable energy communities and PPAs because they both can live without an assets behind.
So we cannot afford to lose the momentum, especially with what we are living right now in the European Union. And
yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Now we can move to the final discussion. I'm going to invite all the discussants involved, and I mean, if some author is implied, we can invite him then to follow us. Okay? Yeah.